as I mentioned, and Tracy, we're starting with our French fries. So let's talk how you make the best French fry that there is. So it really does depend on the type of potato. And I really love food science, which is a shame because when I was in school to be a dietitian, I did not like food science, but now I really do. And all cooking, not only baking, but cooking is so much about science. And I have this really handy book. I probably brought it up in other classes, just like food science questions that I'm super curious about. And so I thought I would bring this out because this talks about why a certain potato makes for a perfect French fries. So you will totally impress your guests the next time you make homemade French fries, and people will be asking you, why are they so delicious? And this is what you'll tell them. So starchy potatoes, what makes a perfect French fry? Starchy potatoes, things like russet or Idaho potatoes, which is what I'm using this evening. Yams and sweet potatoes are low in moisture and high in starch content. And that makes a big difference. Why? Because when heated, these types of can you hear me okay?
My earphones in.
Oh yeah, I do want to remind, just if there's some noise in the background, if you'll keep yourself on mute so we're not a little distracting, and then you can unmute with questions. So, okay, but when heated, their starch cells swell and separate, giving these types of potatoes a fluffy, dry texture when baked, and then a nice crisp flakiness as they're baking, making the perfect French fry, right? Because we always want a little bit of crisp and some fluffiness inside. So with that being said, making your homemade sweet potato fries or from your yams is also a really good idea. So, but today we're using Idaho potatoes or russet potatoes. So one step, something else that makes a big difference with French fries is soaking them. I hear a little bit of background noise. If someone could mute themselves, that would be great. Thank you. I know there's a lot going on. Okay, so when you get started with your potatoes, you do want to soak them in very cold water. So I have a pot here. These have been soaking since about 5:15. You know, if you can have them soak for about half an hour, that's perfectly fine. So I have some cold water here. I added some ice cubes to it, and I added a tablespoon of salt. So you see my potatoes soaking. And this is important because it will draw out a little bit of that starch, which just sort of aids in just sort of creating the perfect French fry, okay? So you can cut your French fries however you want. So I will just finish. I have 1.5 potatoes in here. You could certainly do this with just one. And I like a thinner potato. So I've been cutting them a little bit like this. So you just want to make sure, as with anything you're preparing, that you cut everything uniformly. And that's so they cook evenly, right? If I have some pieces that are like really big and others that are really thin, we've got uneven cooking. And so that's what we want to avoid. So I'm just going to finish slicing these pretty thin. You'll notice I'm leaving the skin on. So I like the texture, sort of the earthiness that comes with leaving the skin on. Of course, we know it's a great source of fiber, leaving that skin on. If you prefer to peel them first, you by all means can go for it. But if you are leaving the skin on, you do want to make sure that you're giving it a good scrub. And that way you're just cleaning it pretty well. If you got your CSA box this week, you had some red potatoes in there. So they were really fun. You could use those for French fries as well. Tracy, how you doing?
I'm good.
Good. Okay. Everything moving along. Okay, I'll periodically check in with you. Let me just take a peek and see who else was here. I just want to say hello. Oh, Leslie, good to see you. Yvonne, Veronica. Oh, I'm so glad everybody's here. Good. Hopefully, like I said, everybody was nice and safe after the storm last night. Okay, so I'm going to let these soak for just a few minutes before I drain them. In the meantime, let's talk seasoning. So I mentioned that the name of this recipe is called drive-through seasoned fries. And this is sort of a little spin on what would be the Arby's seasoned French fry. And I always like to share this story. When I was thinking of recipes and doing a little bit of searching and testing, I saw this recipe for these sort of like Arby's French fries. And it made me think, when my parents were first dating, they are high school sweethearts. My dad used to take my mom to Arby's on date night for their roast beef sandwiches. And they've been married. I think they just had their 47th wedding anniversary. So they've been married a long time. So my dad used to take my mom there, and he says like, that's how he really got her, was going to Arby's and getting their fries and the seasoning and their roast beef sandwich. So this is a little ode to them, but their seasoning that they put on is really, really tasty and really simple. And what you'll notice through a lot of these recipes is we're using a lot of similar flavors. So let's make this little bit of flavoring mix. So the first thing that we're using is a teaspoon of salt. I've got some paprika. So I have 2 teaspoons of paprika here. I'm using a sweet paprika. If you feel like having a little bit of a smoky undertone, you can do half and half smoked paprika. That would be a really nice addition, or just keep it sweet. And then I have a little bit here of some garlic powder, some onion powder, and a little bit of cayenne, like 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne. So they're not going to be really hot. Don't worry. But it just adds a nice little kick. And then we have this beautiful red color from the paprika, which will just really nicely season the French fries. So I'll set that aside as we prep our French fries. Preston, how are you doing? Everything okay?
Should I preheat my oven now?
Oh, yes. Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned that. My oven is preheating to 425. And so if you do want to allow your oven to preheat, so if you're not quite there yet and you put your fries in, you know, a little later into class, that's totally fine, because we're just baking them. You know, there's like not a lot to it, and it's just a matter of timing. So if these finish a little after class, that's totally fine too. So don't worry. But yes, 425 is the sweet spot in terms of preheating your oven. So from here, once we've allowed our French fries to soak a little bit, we need to drain them. And so what I normally do is, you want to drain them, and similar to making like a kale chip, you want to try to get as much moisture off of them as you can. So what I typically like to do is I will use a fine mesh strainer. You could also use a colander if you just want to pour these right in here, but I'm going to go ahead and use a mesh strainer and just scoop some of these out. And whoops, man down. See, pretty early on, I tend to throw things around the kitchen like halfway through class, but we're starting off really well tonight. So yeah, you could strain these either way. Now, in terms of drying them, I'll be using 2 kitchen towels. I've got one here, one behind me, and I'll just kind of roll this through. Can I use the air fryer? Oh my gosh, yeah. For your French fries? Oh, yes, you absolutely can. You can use an air fryer. Check your air fryer setting for how you would make French fries, but you absolutely can. So in drying these off, you could use paper towels and just kind of dry and get as much moisture off as you possibly can. I like using kitchen towels because, you know, it creates a little less trash, and then I can just wash these and move on with my life. But use whatever you need to. And then we'll grab the last few out of here. And it does make a difference that these really are as dry as you can possibly make them. Oh, goodness gracious. All right, we'll clean that up. Okay. Second towel. Tracy, you doing okay?
Yep, I'm doing all right.
All right, just checking in. Okay, so I lay my second towel on top, and then I just give it kind of a nice roll, and I kind of move it, just to kind of jostle it around. Similar if you were trying to dry lettuce or kale. Again, if you're making this. Perfect. Thank you, Melissa. She just dropped the recipe in the chat, so you can download that PDF.
You are welcome.
And yeah, we just want to try to get them as dry as possible. And then once you're done, we just move them through to the baking sheet. Now, let's talk lining of the baking sheet. You could use a parchment paper if you want. I'll be honest with you. I kind of like the way that these turn out without using a baking sheet. So I haven't been using one, but of course the cleanup is really, really nice. So use whatever you want. If you want to use a parchment paper, or if you have a silicone liner that you prefer to use, by all means, go for it. You, just like roasting any other kind of vegetable, you want to try and get them in a single line. So we're going to lay them out. And you could do one of two things in terms of adding flavor. So again, we want a little bit of oil because that helps create some of that crispness as it bakes. And then it also helps our flavoring adhere to our French fries. So you've got one of two options. I'll be using a little bit of an olive oil spray that I'll use for my chicken sandwich in a bit. Or you could use 1 tablespoon of an olive oil or an avocado oil, or, you know, whatever you wanted to use. But I'll just be spraying very little around here. If you have your own mister or like an olive oil spray, and you don't have something that you're buying from it, that's a fabulous substitution as well. And then from here, I just like to drizzle. Now, of course, and I think it says in the recipe, you know, you can dress your French fries in a separate bowl and then toss them onto your baking sheet. But, you know, if it's one less dish, then I end up cleaning at the end of the night, then I'm all for it. But again, you've got options, right? Okay. So you try to want to do your best just to move them around, make sure that that flavoring gets on both sides. They're starting to take up this beautiful red color of the paprika. Remember, we had a little bit of cayenne, but that just kind of gives it a little bit of kick. If you are really sensitive to heat and you would just prefer to leave it out, go for it. Okay, so again, we'll kind of put these in as best as we can in one layer. They will shrink a little bit. They'll lose some of their size as they bake, but that's it. Okay, so into the oven, 425 they will go. I'll check them in about half an hour, 25 minutes to half an hour, give them a little zhuzh. We'll kind of move them around, and then we'll check on them and we'll see how you do. So again, if you've preheated your oven a little bit different or a little late in class and you're still letting it warm up, totally fine. You can just set these aside and wait for your oven to get warm. And then I'll just show you what they look like as they bake. Perfect. Okay. Questions about our first recipe at all? Everybody okay? Are we all awake? Are we all above water? Is everybody above water? Are we okay?
Yeah, there's no questions in the chat room just yet.
Excellent. Okay, so moving on, let's get to our air fried chicken sandwich. So again, this was sort of a recipe that I found just when I was searching for new recipes. And I did put, because I'll be working with some raw chicken in a moment, I do put a towel down just to cover my cutting board. That's okay. You can always cook again in the future. Don't worry. But I put a towel down just to, you know, because again, I can wash this towel when I'm done and I'm sort of reducing risk of, you know, sort of cross contamination. Okay. So air fried chicken sandwich. It's all about the brine. Okay. So for those of you that started ahead of time, hopefully you had this brine going, but even if you let this brine for a few minutes, totally fine. If you have several hours to brine this, that's ideal what you want to do. So let's talk a little bit about it. We've got equal parts ingredients, okay? So I'm using a little more than half a cup, depending on how much chicken you're using. So the recipe calls for using 1 cup buttermilk, 1 cup pickle juice. If you're using less than what the recipe calls for, you can absolutely use less of that. But the most important part is that your 2 ingredients for brining, it's just a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay. So first we've got some buttermilk. And then we've got our pickle juice. And together over several hours, this really does create a beautiful brine. And so the reason why this really is able to impart a ton of flavor is because you have the acid, both from the pickle juice and the buttermilk, that with some time will start to break down the chicken a little bit and start to infuse it with that flavor. So you will get some of that pickle undertone, which is really nice. We'll set this to
Tina,
the side.
can I just ask a question, just in case they may have?
Absolutely. Oh,
So
yeah.
The instructions were saying to whisk the buttermilk and the pickle juice. Is that necessary?
No, not necessary. If you want to, by all means, but I have found that just giving it a quick mixing, with a fork, like I did, just sort of combining things together, you're totally fine. Totally fine.
Great.
So with the magic of television, I did one earlier. So I have one chicken breast. Now I will say, I am using a thin cut chicken breast. So of course you could buy them pretty thin. We do know that, anything that requires a manufacturer to do a little bit more causes the price to go up. So please don't be afraid if you're just buying regular chicken breasts, using something like a meat tenderizer, putting your chicken between some saran wrap or in a plastic bag, using the flat side to sort of pound it out and creating your own thin cut chicken breast. It's a much cheaper, much more budget friendly option. And so know that you don't have to spend those extra dollars. Okay. So moving on, we will be breading our chicken. Everybody cooking along. Are we doing okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Tracy, doing okay?
Yep, I'm good. I
Okay, good.
started yesterday, so I'm good.
Ooh, excellent. Okay. So just like making a chicken cutlet, we will be flavoring some breading. And I do have two bowls here because I'll kind of be dipping from one to another. But let's start with what we're using as our flavoring for our flour. So I'm starting with just some all-purpose flour here. And then I've got some paprika, some garlic powder, and some cayenne. And all three of these will go in. And then I'll add a little bit of salt. And with the fork, you can just sort of give this a mix together. You don't have to make two different breadings for this. I just kind of like moving from one to another. In here, I have one egg that I did whisk before class. So this will be our bind. So what we'll end up doing is going flour, egg, flour. And it's funny because growing up, whenever I was, in charge of making the chicken cutlets growing up, that was a family favorite for my mom. And I never floured first. I always went chicken, egg, and then flour. But what I've learned is that, this adheres really nicely to raw chicken, allowing the egg to adhere to the flour, and then in turn your second dip. So it really does make a difference. Does it make or break my chicken? It really doesn't, but just a nice little tidbit. Okay, so let's talk air fryer. So in your air fryer, in mine, you have a basket, right? And so an air fryer is essentially convection cooking, which means air is flowing all the way around. So under the bottom, over the top, this allows air to get through. So the recipe calls for putting some parchment paper down with some holes. So I have some here that I bought on Amazon for really cheap, but when I was testing this recipe, I didn't have this fancy stuff here. So I got creative and I thought back to when I was in kindergarten and I used to make snowflakes that we would hang out of paper. Are you with me here? And right, so you take a piece of parchment paper, fold it up, cut into it a little bit, open it up, and now we've got a snowflake of parchment paper that allows you to have airflow through the center. So that's why they want you to use, instead of a solid piece of parchment, you want something with holes so that the air can continue to go through. All right. A couple other things to note is with your parchment, you want to make sure that it's not kind of flipping up and out because those edges may burn a little bit. So it's okay to make it a little smaller than the size of your basket, okay? So with that being said, let's do a little dipping. And actually, I'm gonna grab my tray. Because it's got an open bottom and I've got some flour, I think it's kind of nice just to set this on like a little baking tray that comes in my air fryer, just so it catches things that might fall through. All right, so let's start. So I just have one chicken breast here. So that has been brining. And again, I did this around noon today, so it's got a good 6 hours. So first we'll dip in the flour. Let me dump this out over here. And then if you bought the buttermilk and you're like, what the heck do I do with the rest of it? Because, you know, that's often what I think. One thing I can suggest is if you've ever made Irish soda bread or any kind of soda bread, it calls for buttermilk as part of leavening. It's super easy and it's absolutely delicious. So that would probably be what I would use it for, but that's just me. And in Michelle's cooking classes, she has taught us that you can actually make buttermilk. There's a powdered buttermilk that you can buy in the baking section of your grocery store. And that way you don't have like food waste if you only need the half a cup or a cup from a whole bottle. So you've got some options. Okay. So flour, egg, flour mixture. And we've got that paprika. We've got the onion powder, a little bit of the cayenne. So again, we're seeing a lot of the similar flavors through these recipes, which I think is really interesting, but you know, they kind of give us that drive-through flavoring that we're going with. Okay, on to our parchment paper. So the one step that I think I'm 3 for 3 in the last classes. The last step that I usually forget about is using a cooking spray to spray the top of this, because that will add to that crispiness. So 4th time's a charm, but I will just lightly spray the top. Okay. And 380 in your air fryer. If you don't have the manipulation for getting to that temperature, just go up to 400. You'll be totally fine. So I will put this in for about 18 minutes. Halfway through, I will use my tongs. I'll pull it out. I will flip it over, and then we'll finish it. And you want to make sure that it has a nice brown crisp to it. I will say, don't be frustrated if you go to flip this and you lose a little bit of the breading. It happens. It happened to me. You want to try and just be as gentle as possible. If you feel like it's falling off a little bit, wait a couple more minutes before you flip. Let that top side get a little bit more crisp, but don't worry, it will still taste delicious. So I'm going to pop this in my air fryer. Okay. And I have mine set to 400. I know you can't see me, but I have mine set to 400 because mine goes in 25 degree increments. So instead of going down, I just went up. Okay. All right. How's everyone doing? How are we feeling about this? Everybody okay?
Go Sandy. Go find Sandy.
Preston's having so much fun over here.
Oh, good. So Preston is Melissa's son, who is 13. I hope you don't mind me sharing, but I love that he's joined us for class, because I think the more that we can get our kids into the kitchen, in to cook with us. Oh, there he is. Hi. I love it. You know, this is like life skills. Like, you know, you're not that far away from having to be on your own, and just being able to kind of put a meal together in a kitchen, I think is fabulous. So I love that he's joining. So, and I always say, we had another family that joined, and her 2 daughters cooked along with us. So the more the merrier with our cooking classes. So Preston, I'm so glad you're here. Good. Okay. Any questions about the recipe so far? We're feeling okay?
Yeah, nothing in the chat right now.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, let's move on. So I
Hi.
think this,
Did you go to the Acme?
oh, hello, we can
Oh.
hear you. I do love the Acme, I will tell you. I
Sorry.
want to make sure. That's okay. Oh my gosh, don't worry. In a world of technology, it happens. I'm just peeking through to see who else is here. So,
Sure.
okay, let's move on to our
Hey, can you
Mick
just be
Erin
quiet
sauce.
for a minute?
Melissa, could you help muting a little bit just so we
Yes.
don't, thank you.
Absolutely.
We don't distract our lovely guests here. But again, you know, it's a Thursday evening. A lot happens. Okay. So our McErin sauce. I love this. So if you've ever had the Mick sandwich at the drive-thru and they have the special sauce on top and the whole thing, it's what everybody recognizes. Well, I will tell you, this is better and it's healthier and your family won't know. So they have no idea what I put in this other than it tastes exactly like what you get at the drive-thru, and I love it. And that's why I call it the McErin sauce. So it's really easy. You do want this to chill a little bit. So I have one ready to go in the refrigerator, but it's delicious. So, all right, let's get started. So my base, so this is a creamier sauce, which usually when you go through a drive-through, they're using something like mayo as a base. We are not. I am starting with, thank you, Melissa, the famous McErin sauce. I love that. We're starting with yogurt. So I'm starting with half a cup of yogurt. I'm using a Greek yogurt. I'm using a 2% fat yogurt. You could use a whole milk, like a whole fat Greek yogurt. You could certainly use a fat-free. I like it in the middle because that fat does add a little bit of texture. It does add to the creaminess of it all without being sort of like overly creamy, but I do like a little bit of texture. So I am using a 2% milk fat for that. So I've got half a cup here. From there, I'm adding 2 tablespoons of a dill relish. So your favorite dill relish you can use. If you're using a sweet relish, we're going to be adding a teaspoon of honey in a moment. You may not need it if that has some sweet undertones. So I would just taste it first and see if you need a little bit of that sweetness. But I'm using dill because that's just what I prefer. Okay, I've got some finely chopped red onion, a little more than 1 tablespoon. You do want to make sure that it is finely chopped because we want it to sort of blend in together with everything. We want those little pieces. We don't want like these big bites of onion, even though they add some really good texture. We want it to kind of blend in. So I do have some finely diced red onion. If you don't have red onion, use a white onion, a sweet onion, even a shallot would be fine. The purple from my red onion really brings some nice color, but if you don't have that, use whatever kind of onion you have, okay? And then I've got a tablespoon of some Dijon mustard here. So again, whatever kind of Dijon mustard you have. I've got a Dijon that's got a little bit of sort of extra oomph to it. It's got a little bit of kick to it, which I really like, but again, use whatever you have. Now, here's my little teaser. I've got 2 tablespoons of ketchup that I'm adding. This ketchup I made myself. And if you, so my next cooking class that is coming up for September, October, I am calling Let's Get Saucy. And so what we're doing is learning some basic sauces, condiments, dressings that you can make at home. And one of them is tomato ketchup. And it is delicious. I know Melissa will be putting the link to my Calendly in the chat. I just started sending emails out today. So if you haven't seen an email with it, I will include the link in my follow-up email after class. But I've just been sending it out in groups to our community. But I'm really excited. We're making a tomato ketchup. We're making ranch dressing. We will do a Romesco sauce, which is, oh, good, Tracy, I'm so excited. We're making a Romesco sauce, which is this roasted pepper, roasted tomato, like a Spanish sauce that is out of this world for vegetables. It's a really great topping for fish. So we're going a little bit sophisticated with that. And then we're making a basic creamy vinaigrette because I think, you know, with bottled salad dressings, we really should know how to make our own vinaigrette and then you can sort of manipulate it from there. So, oh, but we're making ketchup and it was wonderful. It's just wonderful. So that'll be really, really fun. Okay. And then finally, so I added my ketchup. I am adding some seasonings. So I've got half a teaspoon of paprika and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So that's going in. And then I'm adding some white wine vinegar, 1 teaspoon. And if you don't have a white wine vinegar, You could use an apple cider vinegar. You could use a red wine vinegar. I would not use a balsamic vinegar just because with the deep color of it and a little bit of the sweet undertone, and because I'll be adding a little bit of honey. But any other kind of like that type of vinegar, I think would be absolutely fine. And then we've got a teaspoon of honey for some sweetness. And again, if you're using a sweet relish, you may not need to add the honey. Just give it a taste and see what you think. Okay. And then we combine. And it will start to take up that really sort of pinky blush color that we want. You'll start to see a little bit of the relish, those bites peek through. We see a little bit of the red onion peek through. This is really nice. Okay. And then we can sort of just give it and see what you think. Oh my gosh, it's so good. Oh, every time I make it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so good. I just
Preston is loving it over here, Erin.
Oh my gosh, it's still, I know. Oh, good. Yes, kid approved. I like it. Okay, so again, you do want to chill this. So I have magic of television, have some chilled already that I will put this over to the side and we'll grab when we need it. So enjoy your McErin sauce. You know, you can use it for a lot of different things, a lot of different sandwiches, but it is really fun to make. So, okay, so that's our McErin sauce. Let's move these out of the way. I'm going to do a little bit of checking on what we have going on in our oven. For those that are cooking along, everybody doing okay? I'm hearing some.
Everyone's saying,
Ooh.
well, no comments just yet.
Okay. All right, Tracy, you're doing okay. I am flipping my chicken. It looks pretty brown. I just flipped my chicken in the air fryer. I'm about halfway through, so I don't mean to step away from the screen, and I sprayed the other half if you can. All right, so I'll continue with that. Again, if yours in your air fryer doesn't have that sort of brownness that's going, that's okay. Let it go for a few more minutes. Even after that 20 minutes is done, if you need a little bit more time, totally fine, totally fine. And then let's check my French fries. Okay, how are we doing here? All right, we're getting there. I am just going to give them a little bit of a zhuzh. They're sticking a little bit. It's because I didn't use the parchment, but that's okay. Kind of move them around. Okay, all right. And then they'll go back in. And, you know, depending on your level of like how crispy you want your French fries, you can leave them in. If you want them in longer than the 40 minutes, that's totally fine. So you can kind of eyeball it a little bit. All right, let's do that. And we'll let them keep going. Okay. Now for the last, and I think the most delicious, let's make our homemade Wendy's Frosty. So let me grab my ingredients here. So this is really fun. You do want something that has a little bit of speed and intensity in terms of blending. So I'm using a Ninja. I'm using one of these guys. You could certainly try an immersion blender, a Vitamix, or any high-powered blender would be fine, but you want something with a little bit of power behind it. Okay. So let's get our ingredients together. All right, my little serving. Okay, so you don't need, so this recipe does serve one. So you're welcome to sort of double or triple this depending on how many you're serving. So first things first, our base of this is a frozen banana. So let me go to my freezer. When you freeze your bananas, you know, the best is trying to have it be as ripe as possible. Mine were pretty ripe, I think, when I threw these in. They were like on their last day. And then you just want to break it in half. That will go in first. Okay, now we're adding some vanilla. So it calls for like a teaspoon. You can use a little bit more. I tend to eyeball it. 1 teaspoon of vanilla. I've got some cocoa powder, some good cocoa powder here, 1 teaspoon. So all of that will go in. I am never opposed to being heavy-handed with my cocoa powder. So if you want a little bit more chocolatey to it, then by all means go for it. I'm going to start with one that was probably a heaping teaspoon. So let's start with that. Okay. The fun ingredients. So this is really, this is my little trick with making a smoothie or making any kind of blendy thing that I want a nice thickness to. I am using Acacia Fiber. All right, so I bought this on Amazon. Do you absolutely need it? You don't. It wasn't that expensive, but this is, so it's a soluble fiber in the same family as like psyllium husk, okay? So being a soluble fiber means that it draws water in, it creates like that like thickness, that creaminess that we want. The reason why I like this more in a smoothie, and thank you, Melissa, or a cold beverage compared to something like psyllium husk is because it's super fine. So it blends really beautifully into cold beverages, whereas psyllium husk doesn't always blend that well. So I just really prefer, so if, I don't know if you can tell, but it is as fine as sand, super, super fine. So I'm using half a teaspoon. If you want something that's a little bit thicker, you could go up to a full teaspoon, but I would not do any more than that because it will create quite a bit of thickness. So, so this is my fun little tip, Acacia Fiber. I'm sure you can get it in some stores, but it wasn't readily available when I got it. Of course, if anybody lives in Center City, this thing will probably outlive me because I've had it for a while and I like barely made a dent. So I'm happy to share with my neighbors. So there's that. Okay. And then finally, as a little bit of added sweetener, I am using a sweetened vanilla oat milk. So I like oat milk again for the creaminess. This has a few grams of added sweetener because it is sweetened, but this is the only added sweetener that I'm using. If you really prefer to use an unsweetened variation of it, by all means go for it. I have 8 ounces here. I'm not going to use all of it just yet. So I'll start with like half. If I feel like I need to add a little bit more as I blend this up, I will do that. The first thing I'm going to do is before I add the ice, I will give this a blend to sort of break down the banana. So let me do that first. If it gets loud, it usually like blocks the sound out a little bit. So I'll start this first.
Stop.
Okay. There we go. Let's see. All right, it's not quite breaking up my banana, but that's okay. We'll add the ice and we'll let it work a little bit. Plus I can add some. Oh, we're getting there. We're getting there. Okay, so I'm gonna add a few ice cubes to this. I might add a little bit more of my oat milk. I can definitely see it's starting to get thick, both from the frozen banana and from our Acacia Fiber. But I do want to run it a little bit more. All right, so we've got a few ice cubes there. We'll put the lid back on and then we'll let this, oh, you know what, let me add a little bit more. And this is just delicious. Again, if you are seeking a little bit more of a deeper dark chocolate color, then add a little bit more of that cocoa powder. That's totally fine, totally fine. Oh my gosh, let's see how this looks. Oh my gosh. Oh, who says you can't have dessert for dinner? Not me, not me. Okay. Oh my gosh, this was great. So I am not going to use all of the oat milk. I don't need to, but again, kind of eyeball it. So here we've got a nice thickness, just what we want. Oh my gosh, this is just delicious. Oh, I had a little bit of banana in there, but that's okay. What I like to do is take a little bit of dark chocolate. I pulled out a little extra as a nice little sweet treat later. So who says you can't have it? But anyway, I like to shave some dark chocolate on top as a nice little garnish. You don't have to do that, but I like to do that because why not? And then add a little spoon and then cheers. And here's our own little Frosty. Oh my gosh, you get out of town with that.
Is it delicious?
Oh my gosh, it's delicious. Tracy and Preston, I don't know if you're with me, but
Absolutely delicious.
Yes, it's very good.
oh my gosh, it's like chocolatey, it's creamy, it's got the right texture to it between the thickness of the banana. Now, let's talk a little bit about, okay, so perhaps you just looked at this recipe today and you're like, okay, I don't have Acacia Fiber and Amazon doesn't deliver that quick. And not every grocery store has it. So what do? You could do a couple things. You could add a little bit more banana to it to create that thickness. You could use a psyllium husk fiber. So I know this sounds kind of weird, but if you have something like a Metamucil, which is essentially psyllium husk, you could add a little bit of that as well. Some people will also add, bear with me, frozen cauliflower rice, which doesn't really alter the flavor of this. Could you use chia seed or flax? So you could try chia seed. Actually, before I answer that, let me go back to the cauliflower rice. So you could use a little bit because it does puree really nicely. It doesn't really alter too much of the flavor of this too much, but it does create a natural thickness in something like smoothies. And it's another way to get in some really lovely vegetables. So you could try that as well. Okay, so let's talk chia seed or flax. You could absolutely, that's my air fryer, so I'll get to that in a moment. You could add flax to this, ground flax, but flax doesn't thicken. So you certainly could add it just as like a nutritional upgrade, and that would be totally fine. Chia seed, you could add to it, but again, you have to let it sit a little bit to allow it to swell and then thicken. So certainly you could try that. You could give this a mix, add some chia seed to it, perhaps let this sit overnight. You could even before you got to the step that you added the ice cubes at the end, maybe you blend this, add your chia seed, stick it in your fridge overnight, let it sort of blend to that sort of custardy texture. And then you've got a little bit more like a chia pudding, depending on how much of the seed that you use, but that would certainly add some solidity to it as well. So you could certainly give that a go. Okay, let's check on my air fryer chicken. For those that are cooking along, how are we thinking of timing for our air fryer chicken? How are yours looking? Okay, I'm going to clean up a little mess I have.
I actually put mine in the oven because I put the fries in the air fryer. The fries came out good, but the oven.
Okay, good. Okay. Well, I'm glad. Here, let me grab my air fryer or my chicken, and I'll let you see what this looks like. Ooh, so this has a nice little crisp to it. I'll show you what this looks like. So this got nice and brown. That looks pretty good. All right, let's plate this and we'll see how it looks. So let me grab, I have a nice little sandwich here with my sesame seed bun. All right, so let's talk food safety with chicken because this is really important. So chicken should be cooked to the magic temperature is 165. Usually, this is pretty firm. So I actually am not afraid at all that this is not up to temperature. But if ever you're cooking chicken you don't cook it in the fridge, you don't, in the oven or on the grill or however you're preparing it, and you're wondering if it's cooked through, a meat thermometer is your best friend. So you can use a digital one, you can use an automatic or like a dial meat thermometer. 165 is the magic temperature, and it is really important with poultry that you're cooking it completely. Again, so we reduce the risk of getting anybody sick, okay? So let's grab my refrigerated Erin sauce. We'll add a little bit. It does thicken up as it sits in the fridge. You don't need to chill it for that much, but it takes on a really nice texture. I've got a little bit of some spring greens here. And I added some pickles. Some summer tomatoes would be good on here. Even if you had some pickled red onion, I know we have red onion in the sauce, but I think even some pickled red onion would be a really nice texture. We have a great back to basics video in our Her library of how to make pickled red onion, which is absolutely so delicious and so easy. And I am using, because it's the healthy drive-through, I am using a traditional sesame seed bun. Of course, you could put this on any sort of bread that you wanted. You could go whole wheat, whole grain. You could put this on a wrap. You could have it by itself. So you can have this however you want. I'll cut this in half. Oh my gosh. And there we go. Let me show this. And now we've got a beautiful air fried chicken. Can you see that okay? With our pickle and our greens. And if you're trying this, also in the directions, as Tracy mentioned, you can put hers in the oven. So you can bake this in the oven. You can throw this on the grill. So know that you don't need an air fryer for these sorts of recipes. If your oven has a convection cooking nozzle or setting that you can do it, you could do it in that as well, because again, air frying is essentially convection cooking. That air is sort of circulating around it. So if anybody's taste testing, I don't want to have a mouthful of food, but I will have a straw full of food. So that's fine. But if anybody wants to let me know, or Preston, if you tried it, if you want to give a true and honest opinion on what you think this chicken sandwich is like, you can let us know. No hard feelings, I promise.
He's putting the McErin sauce on it as we speak.
Excellent. Okay, while you're setting that up, let's check our French fries again. We'll see how we're doing. How are we doing on time? Oh, we're making great time. Okay. And if anyone has questions along the way, please let me know. Oh, these look great. Oh my gosh. Okay. So these look great. Oh my gosh. Yeah, these are perfect. Perfect, perfect. So they've got, some of them have a nice little brown crisp to them, right? So we know that they're baked. They have a nice firmness. Oh my gosh, these look wonderful. So again, French fries are one of those things that if you like them a little bit more well done, you can leave them in a little bit longer, but these look perfect. So I'm going to set these down. I'm going to grab my homemade ketchup. Let's turn my oven off. And let's see how they taste. See, doesn't that look like Heinz? I know. I was trying to convince Melissa that it does look like Heinz, so we'll give this.
I am
These are probably going to
sure.
You know, I had a friend that he said there's just certain things in life that you have to buy the brand name of. And for him, his two things, he said ketchup and Q-tips. And I thought, okay, I get that. Oh my gosh, delicious. Yeah, so using, oh my gosh. First of all, this ketchup is delicious. That is delicious. That's absolutely wonderful. And the French fries, just as we want, sort of that starchiness and that low moisture, they have a really beautiful crisp, but they have like a beautiful fluffiness to the inside. This is absolutely perfect. So again, ones that have a little bit of that starchiness to them. So your russet, your Idaho, your sweet potatoes, your yams, they make for the perfect French fry. So as we're moving into fall and winter, and we're seeing more of those comfort foods, some of those starchier vegetables come through with the season, you know, consider making some really good French fries. And then having your Frosty with that. All right. So there you have it. Our healthy drive-through. Excellent. What do we think? So those are cooking along. Do we have any final thoughts or reactions to the recipes? Again,
You Preston's. Here's Preston's.
I know, it's great.
wait, let me hold on. Let me find. Oh, there you are. Oh, that looks great.
Yeah, he did a great job.
You did do a great job.
Don't mind the flour on it.
That's okay. Don't worry. Oh my gosh. And Tracy's kids already took the smoothie. I know that's what happens. That's what they go for first. I know. I know. Oh,
Well,
that's so wonderful. You guys did great. Can't wait to try these. Alice, I can't wait for you to try these as well. And as I always say, you know, if you are in the kitchen making these recipes, any of our recipes that you get from our classes, and you have questions about them, please feel free to call us, shoot us a text message. I mean, we all know when we're like working with a recipe, we have to know right then and there, right? Because you're like, you have all these things going on and it's like, oh, so we are always available. Shoot me a text message, give us a call. We're happy to walk you through it. We're happy to answer your questions. We want you to succeed in the kitchen. So excellent. Okay. It is kid friendly. It's yeah, agreed. It's totally kid friendly. It's big kid friendly. It's little kid friendly. It's something a little fun. You know, going into the Labor Day holiday, this is really fun stuff that you can make as sort of, again, the unofficial end of summer, you know, making a healthier version of all of these things so that you have a little bit of indulgence, but you can feel good about it too. So wonderful. All right. Well, listen, if you have no other questions, I am so glad that everybody showed up. Hopefully everybody stays safe and, you know, help your neighbors if they're trying to get through the storm last night. But I appreciate everyone being here and cooking along with us. It's always so wonderful to see you. Hopefully we'll see you in the kitchen again as we go into September and October. Again, I'll share my link for our new upcoming classes in my follow-up email. But yeah, happy cooking to everyone. Thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
thanks, everyone. Have a
Thank
good
you.
Thank
one.
you.
You're welcome.
Have a great night. Enjoy the holiday weekend, everyone. We'll see you again soon.